Welcome dear viewers. I hope you all are in good health. Today we are here to share views on the topic democratic deficit. An analysis. It will not be wrong if I say that this topic is one of the least explored topics in case of social research in India. However, rigorous research has been done on the factors behind democratic deficit. It seems an academic paradox, but we shall be able to understand as we proceed to explore this concept in details. Let us begin from the ground from which the concept roots up. Democracy it is. Democracy in the most commonly known terms is the government for the people, by the people and of the people. It implies very heavily philosophical as well as emotional notions. It denotes that the whole governance and its related systems and institutions owe their existence and functioning to the people of the land. Taking the thread ahead, we can understand the concept of democratic deficit now. This implies a situation where the democratic institutions are no more able to catch people's faith when people lose faith in the government, when the governmental and other democratic institutions and systems are underdeveloping, when in the race for economic growth and development the interests of the marginalized sections of people are being avoided and the like. This phrase and the like in this case poses high levels of hopelessness and de-routinization in people. People feel derooted from their governance systems, from their legal institutions mentoring their life on large scale, and above all they feel alienated from the whole setup around them. Democratic deficit does not only occur at national levels. It has its very deep roots in grassroots governance and administrative levels also. Contracultures in small, remote rural areas and tribal areas are also examples of democratic deficit. A community creates its own cultural practices against the law of the land since it subconsciously or consciously realizes it's being de-linked or alienated from the mainstream. This usually happens due to ethnocentric values of different communities or the regional groups. Two strong grounds for democratic deficits are dissatisfaction and alienation. Having a sense of dissatisfaction means socially and mentally feeling deprived. Being alienated applies feeling disconnected from the main realm or the mainstream. In both the emotional stance, one feels uprooted from the main legal and political flow since the governing system and processes seem useless and helpless. The key democratic institutions appear like failures, leading to creating a deficit in people's faith. In key allies in this phenomenal change is people's faith in democratic institutions, our lack of transparency and accountability on the part of the government, absence or lack of social welfare and social good of society at large, failure or lack of developmental policies applicable on majority of the population, etc., etc., and etc. People's participation in political setup also faces a big downfall along with democratic deficit in case of policy making being done by the government. Figure 1 shows various facets of democratic deficits related to people's political participation and voting traits. It shows some features which reflect how democratic deficit symbolizes in political participation. Demographic participation is one factor to understand democratic deficit. In the following part of the discussion, we are going to discuss the factors behind democratic deficit and the impact of democratic deficit on society and government at large. Let us discuss factors behind democratic deficit. First is community dissatisfaction. Community is one of the most crucial components of any democracy. Sociologically saying, community as a concept based on geographical notions, people sharing a piece of land that may be a society, apartment, colony, or we can typically use the word mohalla to explain it in more Indian context, is a community. But with references to the present discourse that is on democratic deficit, we will focus on another and again sociological explanation to the word community. Community is a group of people having a group mind. Persons of one particular community share almost common issues, common problems, feelings, ideas and ideology and the traits too. For example, women, men, children, old aged people, persons with special abilities, agrarian communities, industrialists, laborers, a particular religion's people, some particular caste, any professional class. Some examples which we can quote are criminals and juveniles also. Figure 2 shows the concept of community very beautifully. We can clearly see different communities through the traits and expressions shown through the pictures and their accessories they are holding. For instance, the old aged people can be seen reflecting physical weakness and dependence. Men and women can be seen alone, with children also, and also in other cases with a child and pet in home too. This picture very clearly expresses how typical features can be seen as reflecting one particular community. Now, if we just think about any one of the given examples, we will notice that they seem similar in many ways, like in their sufferings or lifestyles or traits and the like. There are some features of a community which give them a shape of single entity in our minds. These communities form democracy and their response and reaction contribute a lot to the concept of democratic deficit. Dissatisfaction in community leads to large deficit in democracy. The recent examples of farmers' protest can be used here to illustrate. Farmers as a community are standing against some farm laws made by the government, and according to the farmers, these laws shall adversely affect the financial well-being of their whole community. Slowly, rather very radically, this protest gained support from other communities. Youth, lawyers, Bollywood stars, singers and many other sections of society also came and announced their support to the protest. One community's dissatisfaction leads to democratic deficit on a national level. This is an example to see this. The people's support for the law-making institutions and the implementation procedures got weakened, and the impact of this community dissatisfaction can be seen on the economy of the nation at large too. Various calls of partial or total bands has affected the market. Similarly, whenever any community shall possess dissatisfaction against the government and the administrative structures, there will inevitably exist a democratic deficit. Whenever the populist needs are avoided and not addressed, it results into decreasing of people's faith in democratic institutions. Let's now discuss violence, unstable law and order related situations. When anomie gets prevailing, it largely affects the democratic deficit in the nations. Anomie is a situation when older norms are in flux and the new ones have not yet been established. People who were earlier living an ordered and synchronized life crave for stability and normalcy when anomie occurs. This may be seen in case of public violence, riots, revolutions, lawlessness, sudden mob rage and such other situations. Such instances create doubt in the mind of spectators and of course lead to deficit of faith in the regulatory systems. Anomie has been deeply and very theoretically explained by popular thinkers like Emile Durkheim and Robert Merton. I wish we could discuss these interesting theories in detail, but due to paucity of time and space of the pattern of the lecture, we are required to design it in this way. Figure 3 and 4 and also 5 show disappointment people have regarding the political and democratic structures of the nation. These figures show that the most of the adults believe that elections have not been able to bring about much needed changes in the lives of people. Women, as compared to men, show lesser faith in democracy of the nation. In the recent years, gang rapes, brutal rapes followed by animistic murders have been seen. Such instances surely would have affected this ideological phenomena. In addition, the violence and lawlessness in Kashmir is one of the factors which make people's faith in governance and democracy weakened. Figure 6 shows data calculated by National Crime Record Bureau's report on crime statistics shows that death that took place in police custody during the years 2016 to 2019. Police custody is in fact the physical custody of the prisoner with the police, where one should be most protected until the crime done by him is actually proved in the courts, but the situation is otherwise and very worrisome. The data related to death in police custody shows lawlessness within the legal structure. This is one main factor people lack faith in one of the most democratic institutions of the nation, that is police. Hence, violence, riots, violent protests, police tortures, domestic violence, communal lynching, rapes and murders are some major factors which aggravate democratic deficit in the people. Let us discuss functioning of the judicial institutions and the legal redress. Legal redress and legal help is a dream for many in India yet. People from marginalized sections of society like poor people, slum dwellers, women in rural setup, especially where modernity and Western values haven't yet been accepted, disabled persons, old aged people, children from families having poor and weak background and the like. Crimes are done against all sorts of people, but all the victims do not relish equity in case of legal address and redress. Many illiterate, ignorant and poor people who are weak in multiple terms are not able to get justice just since they cannot afford paying for the lawyers and the court procedures. Although free legal aid is one of the constitutionally established rights of Indians, but not everyone knows this. People's not getting justice in time, their harassment in society, social stigmatization after sexual crime done against them and such conditions make them lose faith in democracy and its institutions. The judiciary is too much burdened with number of cases, and red tapeism also already affects the nation's criminal justice administration system. All this is very discouraging for the poor people, especially who rely totally on the government and free legal aid in case they become victim of some crime or violence in any form. Democratic deficit in such a situation is must to occur. Now, illiteracy and ignorance. Provoking an unguided and immature mind is the easiest task. This is where the Indian ideological setup gets most affected. Most of illiterate people are ignorant too, though there are some persons who are highly aware of things around them even after being illiterate, but there are just a few exceptions. Illiteracy makes a person dependent on others to stay informed, and hence misinformation can result into devastating impacts. People being ignorant become part and parcel of violence, violent protests, and make the situation even more complicated. They are easily driven to form an anti-national conditioning which even they themselves are not aware of. The governmental bodies and also the community based groups need to work more and more on improving literacy statistics in India, which shall prove to be a blessing in many cases, including improvement of the situation linked to democratic deficit. Let's now talk about unemployment and employability. Unemployment cannot be disconnected from illiteracy as such, but still it has many other angles to be explored too. Unemployment is a situation which is linked to many factors like lack of professional training, weak educational system, appointment of non-eligible teachers in schools and colleges, irrational curriculum, corruption, lack of professional skills, forced or anomic division of labor and the like. Figure 7 shows the glum realm of employability across different domains of academics in 2020. The data shows that in almost all the degrees mentioned in the figure, which are from the most in demand categories in India, not more than 50% people are employable. When people are educated, qualified, but are not getting jobs, this is very disappointing. It questions the educational system of the nation, the administration and governance, the developmental policy making, the manifestos of almost all political parties claiming social welfare, success, and finally, this leads to an irreparable democratic deficit. Let us discuss criminality and rise in crime rate now. This is one such reason which hits all sorts of minds: literacy, education, employment, rural dwelling, urban livelihood, and such factors seldom retard this factor to influence, rather adversely affect people's faith in government, governance, and formal institutions. When crime rate increases and people's social security decreases, democratic deficit increases for sure, ranging from small level crimes like eve teasing, road snatching, to high level crimes like road rage, lynching, rapes, mob attacks, and the like, affect people's faith in political and police administration, criminal justice administration, and hence overall governance. When the cause of social welfare and general social good seem a failure, democratic deficit perpetuates and also exaggerates. It has been noticed in many cases when people in large group thrash doctors practicing in private as well as public healthcare institutions. This is clearly the result of democratic deficit. When people lose faith in an institution of the government and they feel hopeless, anyone randomly can be the victim. What happened in case of hospitals and other healthcare institutions? Medical negligence and the lack of moral support being faced in these institutions reflected governmental failure. Accordingly, the response of the masses is affected. This social response as a result of democratic deficit may take violent form or may remain non-violent to a large extent. But one element which is indispensable in both the cases is lack of faith, or we may say no faith, which is exactly a synonym to democratic deficit. Now, what are the impacts of democratic deficit? We will discuss now. The impacts of democratic deficit are usually alarming and irreparable in many situations. In a democratic nation like India, voting is the basis of individual expression and his or her participation in the political structures. Individuals elect their representatives themselves ideally. But in case when there is a dropout in voting, or If people do not exercise their right to vote just due to being disappointed with the democratic institutions, it is a big matter of concern. Figure 8 shows the voting range of the India's 2019 elections. The data tells the situation of both rural as well as urban areas. The turnout in both the cases is not more than 70%. It shows there is a complete gap of 30%, and these people did not turn out to cast their votes. This reflects severe democratic deficit in the nation. Voting is in fact an expression of people about the political process, and hence this shows that it largely affects people participation in political scenario, showing the face of failure to the concept of democracy. When legal systems are not working, inequity for all, for everyone, when people no more dare to rely on governmental structures and democratic institutions for their safety and overall security, they become prey to suicidal generic impulses and may even succumb to those mental pressures. In many cases, suicides have been committed by people due to reasons like delay in judicial processes, torture by police, lack of community support or lack of protection against harassment and the like. If the administrative institutions are strongly working for social good and fast redress mechanism, this can really check suicidal tendencies in individuals also. Hopelessness in case of unemployment tends to increase rate of crime also. Youth which faces failure in settlements or have delayed settlements due to issues of employability, they become prone to criminal tendencies. The democratic deficit developing within their personality can have wide social implications. Terrorism has also been linked with democratic deficit. Youth turn out to be terrorists since their religious or community sentiments are either not respected or due to being ignorant, they are easily provoked to believe in the same, as discussed in some earlier parts of this lectures also. Another very ardent loss a nation's economy and developmental regime can face due to democratic deficit is brain drain. The persons who could prove to be assets to their own nation migrate to other nations since they have lost faith that things in their native places will improve. The conditions which prompt them to take such decisions include increasing crime, communal rioting, youth distress, crime against women, rape and brutal murders of girl children and young females, atrocities by police officials, and in many cases it is severe environmental degradation also. People get educated, but apply that knowledge in other nations. This brain drain is a reflection of big social as well as economic loss to the native country. In conclusion, we can say that while concluding this discussion, we have to be very logical. We cannot suggest things which are not grounded, since only working on ground level can actually improve things while they grow. The basics have to be improved. Figure 9 shows us the whole realm of democratic deficit. This will not be wrong if we say or believe that democratic deficit occurs when people's basic human rights are endangered. Their right to education, their right to earning, living a dignified life, privacy, mental peace, stability, and peace in their region of dwelling and the like. Any risk to these rights or liberties obviously poses serious challenges to democracy and democratic institutions. Governmental as well as non-governmental organizations need to work on increasing literacy and skill development so that employability can be enhanced. When the youth gets recognized in terms of their ability in their own native place, they will neither develop deficit of faith in their very own system nor they will think of going abroad, leaving their families here. There is a need that people's role on decision making is increased. This can be done with large scale social impact assessment, that is SIA, in case of implementation of some new or amended legislation. Pilot studies must be undertaken and advanced analysis must be made in order to watch out for the public adversities which may result in the later stages. For any liberal nation, there ought to be zero democratic deficit. Let's hope that soon our nation attains that by making different communities safe and secured, by providing functional education, and by making people have faith that their expression and participation in political system matters a lot. Thank you all for listening to the discussion. Hope to see you all again. God bless you. Stay healthy and happy.